Get ready for sports, news, and entertainment. All right here, your 7 minutes with Simmons starts right now.
Come on down to Marineland and buy our rides. I guess this is the new slogan. Welcome back to the pod, guys. Episode number 26. This is 7 minutes with Simmons, and as always, I am your host, Christian. I appreciate your presence. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Always means the world to me. Thanks for your comments, your likes, whatever it is. Keep it up. Anyways, let's get into today's episode. Marineland, as many of you locals know, is currently in its teardown phase. It's been in this state of almost non-existence for a couple of years. They're selling the majority of their rides. That's a new headline this week following a new segregation of the park into 4 different chunks of land. Now, the idea is they're going to move these rides out. So the new ownership, which is on its way in, can bring in new attractions. Now, has anyone even been to Marineland in the past couple of years? I've been a long time ago. And if you listen to my podcast episode from not yesterday, but I think it was the day before, we talked a bit about my experience on the drop tower where I thought that I was going to fall out the whole way up and down, which was pretty interesting. And I still to this day, I'm scarred at Marineland. I will never go on a drop tower there or anywhere else. That drop tower experience was awful. But that was the last time I've been, and that was probably 10 years ago. And since then, over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been an outpouring of complaints and charges filed against Marineland that has slowly seen that brand and that amusement park almost, collapse. Now, before the whole animal treatment crisis and all that, they were huge, right? A huge thing here in Niagara Falls. They were maybe up there in the competition with places like Canada's Wonderland and I don't know where else, you could really compare, a Canada's Wonderland and a Marineland to here in Ontario, but they were similar. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, the park has received plenty of criticism for their treatment of animals. Most notably back in March of 2024, there was an incident involving 3 black bears. They were kept in close quarter confinement with little access to water for months. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The park has been investigated for years prior to this event, and the more shocking piece of information was the park's defense strategy. There was no, hey, look at this. Here's the alibi. Here's the piece of information that exonerates us. This is how you can tell we didn't do this because we care for our animals in this way. No. They had almost zero defense beyond attacking the procedural position of the prosecution and kind of how they were going about their convictions. And as a result, an $80,000 fine, chump change, I might add, for a park like Marineland, was allocated along with a guilty conviction. And prior to that, there was a grocery list of other violations placed on Marineland. If you go all the way back to 2013, there was a mandate ordering the park to separate baby cubs from adult bears to limit violence, which should be a no-brainer. There's a continued culture of not taking care of animals. There's this continued negligence on behalf of whoever's making decisions over there. And, it should be a no-brainer. Again, a couple years later, in 2016, the park was charged with 1 count of failing to meet prescribed levels of care, also involving black bears. Who's in charge of the bears, man? It's Ranger Jones out there? If somebody gets that reference, comment down below where you know it from, and I promise I will shout you out on the next episode. That's a tough one if you can get that reference. And then there was the continued criticism of the animals passing away, under the park's care. Most notably, the last killer whale held in captivity. The name was Kiski, died after 47 years in captivity back in 2023. And it's a snowball. It's a snowball with Marineland that just continues to build. And you got negligence, you got lack of care, confinement issues, you got animals passing away, all wrapped up into this snowball that just keeps rolling. Like, it just keeps going, it keeps growing. And I think it's going to be difficult for Marineland to recover from something like that. Now, on the flip side, if we get back to the more presence of things, I think, with the new ownership coming in, obviously comes new opportunities, but how do you compete with other local amusement parks? And there's a couple of ways I see this being an issue. Marineland's position, if you don't have those animals, is to now go get better rides. And I guess they're doing that. We'll see how things progress on that front. But then there's the whole other issue of, I keep coming back to the damage that's been done to the brand here. Like, obviously, the previous ownership group had zero accountability for their actions. They failed to make adjustments. If you look at this chronologically, there's a continued lack of attentiveness to these kinds of incidents. Their first incident was over 10 years ago, back in 2016, or no, it was 2013. And since then, the pile of complaints has only grown in size. It hasn't shrunk. And that's a very, very difficult brand image to manage when you think about the Marineland Park, even that property. Like, anybody who lives here in Niagara Falls knows Marineland to be a breeding ground for inadequate care of animals. So if you're going to bring animals back, Marineland is not the place to do it. And even if you bring rides in, there's no guarantee that it solves the problem. I would think, maybe a total rebrand, like rip down the Marineland sign and totally rebrand that sucker. Come up with a whole new name, a whole new bit, because I think Marineland has been incredibly damaged over the last 10 years or so. I think it would be very difficult, even given the new ownership group, to come in and make changes that would really make people feel comfortable. But, we'll see how things develop there. If you are interested in purchasing some rides, Marineland has them up for sale. Maybe you could get yourself a nice drop tower for your son's birthday or something. Throw it in the backyard. You never know. That sounds cool. If you are interested, I'm sure there's somewhere you could head, maybe a website online. I don't have that accessible to me, but I can. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Peace.